Check one, two. Testing. Hey, this is office hours. My name is Jeff. Ooh, a little tired this morning. um, hopefully you will be able to find this feed. Hey, Karen, how's it going? Good morning. Good morning. Um, hello. May I just abbreviate that? Abimelech Spike. Hello. I am quite attracted to using the spike addendum on the end there. Sleepwalker, hello. Good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you happen to be. My name's Jeff. This is your weekly office hours where we set aside some time to chit chat about vocals and all sorts of other things. Good morning, JC's Radiant Ray. And JC's Radiant Ray is wishing good morning to those of you throughout the listening audience and chatting audience, of course, too. Vietnam, cool. Call me Spike. Thank you, Spike. Hello, Dragon Ball Prince. Sleepwalker, evening. Hey there. How do you think one can increase control over their range? And hello again. Hello to you. Hello to Deus. Hello, Dragon Ball Prince. Good morning. Todeus, I'm a little tired, Todeus. We have a little bit of a tummy thing happening around here, and it's making us all a little tired. But aside from that, honestly, I am quite tolerant of the sort of mundane maladies that occur, so long as I don't is if as long as they don't bother my throat. As long as I don't start coughing a lot, I kind of don't care that much. So it's all good. Okay, so let's get into this. I do have a question that was emailed in. Folks, I know I was doing that singing questions answered thing. I don't think I can keep it up. I think I've actually reached my capacity in terms of creating videos on YouTube, doing this live event, and doing the lessons that I do. It kind of broke me to do that additional Q&A during the week. So for now, I'm gonna have to just table that. I know I said I was gonna do it for 3 months. It just was not gonna happen. All right, so control. That's a very interesting question. It's a very, very interesting question because I look at control of one's voice, and it sort of depends on what you mean by control and where you're at. If you're talking about the subtleties of shadings of your voice, or if you're just saying like, I can't control it, it quote unquote flies off the vocal fold, it gets abducted or separated, and I inadvertently sing in falsetto. Well, those are two very different places to be in as a singer. If it's the latter, where you're completely losing the continuity of your phonation and that, then this is a lot to do with coordination of the air column and the vocal fold, how the vocal fold is adducting at the flow of air when you're going from inhalation to exhalation. So inhalation is taking air in, and then you start to sing, and you're exhaling when you do that. What is the coordination between the engagement of the torso musculature and how the vocal fold is receiving it? If it's really, really good, then you stand a better chance of getting through your phrase successfully. If it's not, then even from the very beginning of your phrase, you can be um, a little bit questionable there. Now, if it's the former, where you're talking about shadings and things like that, the best advice I can there's a variety of different exercises I think that you can use to experiment with colorations. Realize that this is largely experimenting with how you are adducting the vocal fold. One of my favorites, and I know I talk about this a lot, is the NG exercise. Now, the NG exercise very obviously can come quote unquote forward or rearward. And a variety of things in between. And you can play around with that and then sing the phrase in question to see what the effects are with your voice. Latvia, that's cool. I'm scrolling back here. Hey, Mandy. Hello, Dylan Klein Music. How do you think we can get better range as tenors? That's an interesting question. I'm gonna try to stop saying that's an interesting question because I realize I say that just about before every single question. Um, but that's an interesting question. Um, it depends a bit on what you mean by better. If you mean wider, then for one, I'm quite fond of the super lip trill, the in terms of really working towards generating more subglottic air pressure or support, if you prefer. Um, to continue on up above the registration event, that's above the secondo passaggio. For the male tenor, that's around B4, like right below C5. Um, Now, if you mean better as in more seamless, then that process, in my opinion, is best served by how balanced you can maintain your phonation across the secondo passaggio. So the break, the one that's around in the male tenor, around F4, F sharp 4. The more seamless that you can do that transition, the more balance you enter your cricothyroid dominant singing voice with, and vice versa. Though you'll go up with a nice balance, and you'll come down with really good balance too with practice. And it's that registration event that I think if we can master the balancing act that we play, moving back and forth across that, then we not only have really seamless connection of tone into our upper register, but we also learn so much about our voices and how it works and what it feels like and all those sorts of things that can inform how we use it throughout the rest of our range. Bob Omar, hello. We are still waiting for whistle exercise. Please and video. We love you from Middle East. Thank you so much, Bob Omar. I am practicing. Um, I have been accused of over practicing in the past. Um, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but I know I said this last time too, but I'm gonna say it again. It's really important to me that I understand the process by which these things occur so that I can effectively teach it. So I am waiting on doing anything with that while I practice a bit more, while I understand the process. And before I start, sending out information that is questionable. The last thing in the world that I wish to do is to do that. Mandy, hello. Russ, my vocal instructor says I have notes. I think you mean nodes. What suggestions do you have for exercises to deal with this? Well, first of all, you need to see an ENT if your instructor says you have nodes, an ear, nose, and throat specialist, or an otolaryngologist to get someone to find out if you truly have nodes. They will then tell you what you can or cannot do. In some cases, and please understand, I'm not saying all these things. I do not wish to be alarmist, okay? But in deference to your instructor, if in fact you do in fact have nodes, that needs to be assessed by someone who can scope your throat, put I wanted to say an oscilloscope, but that would not work well at all. Uh, uh, an orthoscope, the ones on the stick, they need to have a look at your vocal folds. I have oscilloscope on the brain. There's something in the studio. We had an old school one with like two like vacuum tubes and actual physical spinning wheels. Man, I got to get one of those. It was such an incredible teaching tool. Um, but I digress. If you so you need to be accurately diagnosed. That cannot be done by your vocal instructor. You need to see your doctor. And your doctor probably won't be able to do it. They will need to refer you, if that's the system that you work within. You will need to see an ENT or an otolaryngologist. They will then tell you what has to happen. In some instances with vocal nodes, you can simply take rest, and in taking rest, they can go away. In more severe cases, other things are required to fix the problem. Again, I do not wish to be alarmist, but the last thing you want to do is to do exercises now when, had you just taken a couple weeks of rest, then you would be able to avoid other things. So that is my suggestion. Yeah, yeah, you got it. Notes right there. David Walsh, morning. Do you recall what you were thinking or what led you to suspect I'd been singing a while? Just the way that your questions were articulated, David. Probably, I don't, I didn't really, I didn't, when I said that, I did not think about why I would say that. In thinking about it now, it is the language that you use and the way that you use the language, and that's I mean that's sort of a general way of putting it. But that's it. Yeah, it's just the questions that you ask and how you're asking them. Singy McSinger Pants. Hello. Um, Gaddis. Hello from Latvia. Should I sing if I've caught a cold? It can be in fact okay to sing if you have a cold. It can be okay to sing with a cold if you can still vocalize over the secondo passaggio. If you cannot vocalize over the secondo passaggio, I recommend that you take some time off, just a little bit, until the cold passes, and then you can get back into it. Thomas Eduardo Souza Miranda. Hi, everyone from Brazil. Hello, Jeff. I am practicing by YouTube lessons. Brilliant. Thank you so much for watching. Todeus. Pardon me. I lose air so quickly whenever I'm phonating in head voice. I can't even sustain for just 5 seconds. I really struggle. Probably too much abduction or separation of the vocal fold would be my best guess. um, I would think about, use it depends on where you're at with your practice. If you're still doing only descending exercises, then stick to oo and e vowels, with the appropriate modification to be over the secondo passaggio. If you're doing ascending descending patterns, then what you might do is work with oo and e and then sandwich the wider vowels in between them, or e and a might be more likely. Sandwiching other vowels in between them. So for like, this is, I'm not going to sing in this above that right now, but for example, no wait, that's not right. Pardon me. So put the wider vowel in between the narrower vowels. What that can help you do is they kind of complement one another. The wider vowels will tend to draw the narrower vowels out a little bit, so you get a little bit better airflow on those. And conversely, the narrower vowels will help you stay better adducted on the wider vowel, a little bit narrower profile for some of those. Cuckoo Designs. How to control cadence and choose textures while singing and preparing. If by cadence you mean your rhythm and how you are proceeding rhythmically through phrases, I would amp up my counting. Subdivide, subdivide, subdivide. Know the rhythms intimately before you go off to perform a piece and make a study of it. That's going to inform how you choose to proceed with them rhythmically, whether you're pulling back on the overall pulse or if you're pushing forward on the overall pulse. Textures. I talked about this at the very beginning, which I think you were here for. Although by textures you could also mean like sort of if you're doing a gravelly kind of a thing or an airy kind of thing, you know, those are those I lump those into the category of artistic choices. If you're singing a song, this could be whether you've written it or not, and you decide that it needs a little bit of grit or a little bit of, vocal fry at a certain location, I think that you're entirely, entitled to do that. That's an expression of your artistry. There will always be some people that think that's amazing, and there will be those that disagree with that choice. That's kind of irrelevant, uh, except I mean, not except, but it's irrelevant to the artistic decisions that you are making. You will never satisfy everyone, and I would make the argument that you are in trying to satisfy everyone, you will almost certainly satisfy the least number of people because you won't make the kinds of artistic decisions that draw us into artists. Case in point, I was turned on to a Sarah Bareilles tune. I've listened to Sarah Bareilles any number of times for different reasons. People working on on her tunes, and then I was turned on to it, and I was like, "Oh, this is really cool." And so I just listened to her for a while. It's all good. So I was listening to another song of hers that I had not heard before, a performance of hers. It's not her song, and she doesn't use any grit. She's not an overly melismatic, like flamboyant kind of singer, but the way that she arranges her tunes, the arrangements and the choices that she makes, her use of ostinato in the right hand of her piano playing, and the variety of ways that she will use abduction and adduction in her vocal performances to convey different states of excitement to the listener, I think is incredible. I think she's incredibly masterful at those things. And so I just thought, I mean, I've truly enjoyed it. You know, had she not made those decisions, then I might not like it as much. By the same token, to someone who doesn't care about those things and wants to hear a lot of and like little riffs and runs, well, they may not like it. They might think it's dull. That's fine. You know, it's a huge wide world out there. And I said this a lot of times too. It's never been better time to be an independent artist and make your music and continue to hone your craft and make your artistic decisions and find the people that appreciate it. I'm certain that they're out there. Tips for reaching top A flats and A for a tenor. Interesting there. You really need a good combination of, well, Ben, actually, I talked about this a little bit earlier in briefly. What I would suggest you do is use the super lip trill to make sure that you've got good subglottic air pressure into that range. That's getting towards the border of where the tenor will be getting ready for the next registration event. So that's well into cricothyroid dominant singing. I would argue that the A naturals are not as different from the G as the A flat is from the A. Because by the time we get to the A flat, we're really starting to get into the next registration event. I always call it that because it's the transition into our falsetto register, but it's not a falsetto sounding kind of a thing. It doesn't get airy and light and wispy. It's really quite full. But the difference is in the mode of phonation of the vocal fold. At that point, the vocal fold begins to separate ever so slightly. There's a certain amount of dampening that occurs. The thyroarytenoid muscles are still engaged, but the cover or ligament on the outer surface area is taking on some of the vibration responsibilities. I say all that to say, when that change occurs, similarly to the when you go over the secondo passaggio, if you do not have adequate subglottic air pressure or support in order to keep the vocal fold closed as much as it requires, then it's quite likely that it'll separate too much and you will get that falsetto-y airy tone. So focus on making sure you've got really good airflow and engagement. Um, yeah, that would be about it. I'm minor seventh. I'm gonna pick that up in just a moment. I had a question come in from Mrs. Webster. I don't know if she's. Oh, hey, there you are. Okay. So Mrs. Webster, I see that you're down there. When I get to you, I'll get to the question. Best way to go about learning mixed voice. I approach it from both above the secondo passaggio and ascending towards the secondo passaggio. So, I mean, if you want to learn about mixed voice, I would recommend checking out Richard Miller's books, Training Tenor Voices or Securing Bass Baritone Voices. You can learn basically, I think, everything you need to know about what it is, how it operates, and how to sufficiently navigate through it. If you're talking specifically about singing practice, I would recommend there's at least half a dozen different videos on my channel about this. There's a couple demonstration videos as well. I would check into it. That would be the fastest, most effective way to get into it. It's a balancing act in there, and too much of any one thing means we don't get consistent tone quality. If consistent tone quality isn't your goal, then that changes a lot of things, and how you approach it could be quite different. Dragon Ball Prince, my head voice goes to G5. Okay. Hello, Maestro. Have a nice weekend. Thank you, Ronaldo. Bible Septian. Hey, Jeff. It's great to see you live again. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Dragon Ball Prince. Am I a lyric tenor? No, I don't think so. I am probably a spinto tenor. Mrs. Webster. Right, Mrs. Webster. Okay, so I, I hope it's okay, Mrs. Webster. I got Mrs. Webster asked a question about microphone technique in the recording studio, and asked how, like, what she should do to accommodate the big microphone. And actually, the only thing that's perhaps the most difficult thing about being in the recording studio is that we in fact want to keep our singing as much the same as we always sing as we possibly can, only making concession for working the microphone if we're going to go really, really loud all of a sudden and backing away from it. But other than that, that's about it. Um, your engineer should set the gain appropriately and set it all up so that you can sing as normally as you would on any other day in any other situation. It's really tough to have a big honking microphone in your face and not sing to it. It's the overwhelming tendency is to sing to that microphone, and almost immediately we start to get into problems of not having enough engagement, enough airflow, and so we get held up on notes that would normally be very easily attainable within our range. From there, all sorts of other bad things can tend to happen with intonation and yada yada yada. So try to sing as you always sing. If the engineer is having too many difficulties adjusting it, then they'll talk to you and you guys will figure it out. But really, we want to sing like we always sing as much as possible. I've been crazy busy. I'm currently at rehearsal. Don't know if I told you guys, but I'm sure I've told Jeff. I work in a youth theater group, and every year we do a full scale musical. That's awesome. Well, good work there, Mandy. I hope it goes really, really. I hope you have a wonderful time at rehearsal. I always loved rehearsals in theaters. Something about being in the theater is so pleasing. Aiden Morrison. Hey, Jeff. I've been going through your videos on head voice, singing up the passaggio. As I get up there around D4 to E4, I get really airy, even when I'm using my appoggio. Any help? Work from the top down. It's almost, if you're working on ascending phrases, any of your old habits are going to assert themselves with a lot more aggression. It's going to be much more difficult to do anything differently when you're singing phrases that are similar to the phrases that you sang with old habits. Start from above this kind of passaggio and work your way down. If you can't find your cricothyroid dominant singing voice, your head voice, the siren is a reasonably good tool to do that, and that's most of what that training becomes, is taking the method of phonation, the mode of phonation, ooh, and becoming more and more specific with that on the exercises. And what we're doing is we're cultivating release. We're only engaging as much as we need to. That airiness is because of abduction of the vocal fold. It's separating. That's an old habit. And it's possible to do exercises that begin with that airy tone and then adduct the vocal fold. But if you're really, really not able to, well, I mean, I don't know what you're capable of. This is just a short little comment here. Let me put it this way: if you have the habit of separating the vocal fold as you ascend through the zona de passaggio and over the secondo passaggio. I don't know how likely it is that you will be able to go from that to an adducted tone, a full tone. So the exercise is those are typically done for vocalists who are using too much muscle tension in the zona de passaggio and at the secondo passaggio. And it sounds like you're probably doing the opposite of that. Disney's A Little Mermaid. Awesome, Mandy. Ansley Hendricks. Hey, hello. Mandy Cummins. I'm exhausted, suffering fairly severe vocal fatigue. Rest as much as you can. Rest as much as you can. Mrs. Webster. Oh, at Russ Knowlting. Capone. Hey. Spinal Tap. I don't, you know what, Capone? That might be the very first Spinal Tap reference that's come in via the chat. I do not recall any others that I can think of. I think I've every once in a while said like this goes to 11, but it usually doesn't result in much. Old Joe's Place song was just listening and noticed it is office hours. Why some vowels break crack the voice? Same frequency. Hmm. That's a very, that's a very interesting question, Capone. Um, that's a very broad question. If I were to arbitrarily narrow it down, what I would suggest to you is that when we talk about vowel formation, and I'm still struggling with the best way to articulate this, so bear with me. When we talk about vowel formation, we're actually talking about how vowels are typically formed in the speaking voice. We're talking about the shape of vowels. So when you say like E is a very narrow, tight vowel, that's how we say it. That's not what we're looking for when we sing it. When we sing these vowels, we want to reconcile the differences so that they resonate similarly. And we get good, consistent tone quality throughout our range. Now, if you take that and then consider that depending on where you and also we're talking about the English language here too. Um, mostly. I suppose well, let's just stick with that for a second here. Depending on where you learned to speak English, the way that you pronounce those vowels could be entirely different. Even if you learned everyone learned in America. Like let's just narrow it down a little further. Okay? So even within America, there are a variety of different ways of pronouncing the five cardinal vowels that we typically use in these exercises. How you pronounce those vowels is going to impact how you sing those vowels and how you conceptualize of how they are formed. So if, for example, like me, I grew up in Michigan, and there it's quite likely that I'm exaggerating, but things tend to come a lot farther forward and you have a lot of that kind of nasality in your sound. And consequently, for a very long time, the ah vowel was really difficult for me because the tendency was for it to be so lifted off the vocal fold, so poorly adducted and light that it would very easily just crack. It would open too wide, the vocal fold would abduct, and end of story. And then I went through a long phase of it being too far back, ah instead of ah. And now I'm in a much better place with that vowel. So there's so many different variables that could be why a given vowel for a given vocalist cracks. And we're not even talking about like differences in airflow and how register can also impact this. How one's phrasing can impact this. So like, for a moment, let's just assume all your vowels are in alignment in your thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice. But now you're above the secondo passaggio. So now you're cricothyroid dominant. But let's just, for the sake of argument, say that your concept of phrasing or how much consonants are meant to be used in your singing is not terribly well developed. So you're not phrasing through the consonants very well. Well, every time you institute that consonant in a word, you are opening an opportunity for the vocal fold to change shape, to lose its elongation, or for the vocal fold to abduct. Those can cause your voice to crack as well. Any lots and lots of different reasons. Hello, Dragon Ball Prince from Cincinnati. I know we talked a little bit earlier about different stuff. Um, Tanner, hey Jeff, love that you do this every weekend. Thank you. I appreciate that, Tanner. Um, I enjoy this too, and I feel like it really keeps me on my toes. Tadeus, how do I get more strength and chord closure above the first bridge? Assuming the first bridge is the primo passaggio, you really need to be focused on balance of airflow and vocal fold engagement. If you're trying to press your thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice into that area, that's ultimately going to prove self-defeating. Mrs. Webster, over practicing. Jeff, you make me happy. Glad I'm not the only one. There you go. Easy to do. Easy to do. Easy to do. It's a, speaking for myself, it was a confidence thing. Um, it was a lack of confidence on my part, and a sort of, well, not sort of, like a very acute sort of self-esteem practice that led to that. It was a way of overcompensating for those things. Ironically enough, it really didn't help that much. I mean, I guess it helped my technique in a way, but it didn't necessarily manifest itself in performance or even auditions. Um, yeah. Jean-Luc Aragon. Hey, Jeff. Good advice. Very interesting. Thank you. Appreciate that. At Jason Raiden Ray, at everybody, and at Mandy Cummins. Tanner Klein. And then on E vowels, my larynx. Oh, right. Tanner, question. When I am singing and attempting to lower my larynx, how raised should the back of my tongue be? Particularly on ah vowels, my tongue wants to flatten significantly, and then on E vowels, my larynx wants to rise a lot. Okay, so one, I'm not without knowing precisely at what stage you're at. Um, Begin with descending patterns first, and I would stick with an oo vowel. There's probably going to be a lot of moving around back there in the early stages of working on. Um, Hold on a second here. Okay, so you're not actually talking about the secondo passaggio. Back up here for a second. Okay, so one, even in this case, descending patterns will be helpful. So rather than "ee-ah, ee-ah," would be a pattern that I would more likely choose to practice that. "Ee-ah." Now, the rear of the tongue is going to descend slightly when it goes from E to ah. I would recommend you put A in the middle. "Ee-ah." The descent from E to A is much smaller than from E to ah, and it can help you to keep the rear of the tongue energized so that when you do get to the ah vowel, it's not descending too low. It's easy to do. E, ah, and we lose that brilliant quality to the vowel, and among many other things. So first, for starters, put A at the end. Also, I mentioned this earlier. I don't know if you were here or not yet, but you might consider putting ah in the middle. E, ah, eh, e, ah, eh. That can really help you find the nice balance between all of those vowels and how they're resonating. Unlikely source. Jeff, how do you approach a long phrase that needs to trail off rather than end abruptly? Yeah, of course that makes sense. That's a great question. Um, One of the first things that I think about when I think about this is that what we're talking about doing is decreasing or attenuating the flow of air over the vocal fold. And if we're going to do that, then subglottic air pressure needs to increase in order to keep the vocal fold from tightening up. Okay. So, um, paradoxically, as you're singing that long phrase, well, hopefully it's not so long that you're getting to it with only sort of the dregs of your air left. We want to get to it, um, hopefully, with a reasonable amount of air within which to do this. Um, it may be worth it may be worth evaluating if there's not a place to be able to squeeze a short little top up breath in there somewhere. I'm not talking about a long, full breath, just a little sip of air in order to keep you going so that you do arrive at the end of the phrase because the more reasonable amount of air that you have, the easier it will be. And again, paradoxically, increase engagement as you are descending in volume, pardon me, in order to keep everything balanced. We want to try and stay as balanced as we can. And if we're going to tip the volume down, then we have to make an adjustment elsewhere. And that usually comes in the form of support or subglottic air pressure, additional engagement of the musculature in the torso in order to keep the vocal fold released. That is how I would approach that. Ed McFarland, thanks for the warm up videos. I've had to do 2 consecutive live shows with a throat infection, dear me, and poor sleep, and your warm ups helped me get through the entire sets. You're welcome. Thank you for mentioning it. Dragon Ball Prince is at JC. Russ Nolting, thanks. Mrs. Webster at David Walsh. JC's Radiant Ray at Dragon Ball Prince. The Sauce. Gotta love the Sauce group. I am astounded by how far behind I've gotten. Where's the sauce? Goodness me. At Mandy, no. Very helpful. Goodness, I'm so sorry, folks. I lost my place here. Fiber optic endoscope. Thank you, David Walsh, for throwing that out there. Trying to sing right since 1968. Brilliant. Yeah, there was the sauce group. Brilliant user ID. Hey, Jeff, just wanted to ask, what's the best mindset for a young student like me learning to become a professional choral singer? Is there any thinking mindset that would keep my voice consistent? I have to tell you, the first thing that comes to mind is blend. Blend, blend, blend. Being a choral singer is not about being a virtuoso necessarily. There are times for that. But your first and foremost responsibility is to be following your section leader and supporting your section leader and supporting their pursuits along with the director. It's a team sport when you're talking about being part of a chorus. So it's about blending. So I would hyper energize my ears to what's happening around me. Um, if you really, really want to go for it, you should learn their parts too. Maybe not necessarily in the octave, like if they're way in the stratosphere, that's not the point. The point is to know what they are singing, um, so that you are absolutely going to line up with them. You can anticipate their phrases. You know where you fit in and where you're not supposed to be. Like I admit, like this was a horrible failing on my part. Like this is something that I did not do particularly well. Um, and I think that's probably why I'm so sensitive to it now. Those are the first things that come to my mind. Um, I would stress to you that it is about being a member of the group, and your own individual voice is an incredible important part of that, but it's still a part of the group. And so, you know, your vowels may not necessarily be aligned the way that you would have them aligned when you're singing your solo repertoire. That's fine. In the group, you're doing something different. I am the worst person to ask about fear. I genuinely don't get nervous. Okay. Maybe for 3 seconds when it's a very large crowd or a place that I'm not accustomed to playing in, but I legit don't get nervous before, and even if I eat glitters, I've never heard that expression before, but I absolutely adore it. I eat glitters at the very beginning. It goes away literally within 10 seconds. That's awesome. I love it. Um, and that's wonderful, Mandy. I mean, it's really, really wonderful. I'm glad that you don't deal with that. And David Walsh, I already read that comment. Yeah, TV on a flexible tube. Mrs. Webster, we are all looking forward to your Passaggio sessions. Cheering you on. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. For those of you that are on the email list, man, the responses were absolutely overwhelming, and I am humbled and grateful to all that. I am gonna, like I mentioned in the last email I sent out, I'm gonna collate all that information, and I'm gonna basically address everything that came in via that survey. So thank you so much. At Dragon Ball Prince, cool. Shatavon Butler, hey Jeff, I've been working very hard on going over the secondo passaggio, and I have managed to go over it more effectively by working with your videos. Now want to know how to make it sound better. If you're only just now getting over it, keep going. Um, be patient. Sounding better is equal parts facility and release of the vocal mechanism. In other words, if you're only just now making it over the secondo passaggio, and by the way, the exercises should have taken you from the top down, so you should have started above and gone below. If you haven't done that, it's quite likely that you're dealing with even more vocal fold engagement than is entirely ideal, and you might want to take a look at that. Um, but sorry, please hold. Um, it's a process. I mean, it's really a process. It's not something that, far be it from me to put constraints on one's ability to learn. Typically, it doesn't happen in a session or two, but who am I to say? Um, my process is one of comparison and contrast and continuing to increase the facility over the secondo passaggio. So, in the beginning stages of my practice, I use wider intervals. This facilitates the vocalist's understanding of what mode of their voice they're using. Am I using cricothyroid dominant singing voice? Am I using thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice? Knowing the difference between the two helps us to become more sensitized to the changeover at the secondo passaggio. So it's not so hard and fast. It's a teeter-totter that teeters over the secondo passaggio rather than, walking through a doorway. And as we become more sensitized to that, we become more sensitized to the subtle transition of engagement and elongation of the vocal fold. That enables us to approach and maintain the appropriate amount of thyroarytenoid dominant singing up to and into the zona de passaggio. So we get as seamless a transition as we possibly can. That is what will make you sound better, or more consistent at least, if that's your definition of better. Better is, of course, a subjective term, and better for you may be not what I'm talking about. And with the time left today, I don't know that I'm going to be able to get to any follow ups you might have, but hopefully that will help. At Mandy, hey Jeff, been following your vids for a while. Gotta say, it's very helpful. Asked though, I've been struggling with pitch. What's the best exercise to deal with this? If you're dealing with pitch, then you are still dealing with an imbalance in vocal fold engagement and airflow. Address how you are engaging with the apogeo. And address how much vocal fold engagement you're using. If you are, I hate to generalize about pitch problems, but if you're going flat, you're usually using too much vocal fold engagement. If you're going sharp, it could be a couple different things, but I would start there. Man, it's funny I don't even see it as courage. That's I wish you all the good fortune in the world. That's good. Capone snapping sound comes now and then. On the live event, Capone? It might be my lips. At Mandy, sympathize with feeling anxious or nervous, but what I tell my hubs all the time is you are not here by accident. Stomp all over your 2 square feet of stage. I like that. That's cool. I have used a similar thought process for myself, I must admit. Laporte. Hello, Jeff. Thanks for the videos. They've helped me. What's the best way to transition from being a classical singer or classical sound to a more modern pop type voice, and how to do it in a healthy way? That's a very good question. All of these musical auditions are now asking for more contemporary sounding audition song, usually pop or rock. I would I would probably begin with some transcriptions. Um, y- you know, yeah, it's that's an interesting question. Um, I would begin with transcription. So if possible, get a few examples of whatever your audition song is going to be. Get a few examples of contemporary vocalists, contemporary pop singers singing it. The main thing is going to be how much and basically listen very intently. Listen to the vowels that they're using. Unfortunately, nowadays it's very difficult, I think, to listen to a transcription of a vocalist that you want to do and separate. How am I trying? There's so much that one can do with fixing things in recording studios that it's quite likely that if you were to sing it exactly as you hear the transcription, it would be incredibly difficult to do it correctly or in tune. Breaking the way that phrases get broken down, the prevalence of really hard attacks on consonants and things like that, all that stuff gets fixed or can be fixed afterwards. Maybe listening to Adele, who doesn't do if she is doing repairs, auto tuning and stuff like that, which I don't know how much or how little of that's really getting done. Um, you know, that might be a better person to listen to because she is at least following some principles that enable us to sing in tune and sing effectively. That being said, her use of glottal attacks, and particularly I'm thinking about like her first record, her use of glottal attacks higher up in her range is really, really hard on your voice, and I would highly recommend you avoid that at all costs. But listening to how she shapes vowels and how she shapes phrases and emulating it is a first step in beginning to understand how you are going to alter your concept of vowel formation and phrasing. Not to mention rhythm, because rhythm, going from the classical realm to the pop realm, the concept of rhythm and how we interpret it is very, very, very different. And that I think is more often the giveaway when you've got a vocalist who's making a transition. It's their concept of how the beat proceeds. Great question. My mischievous sense of humor wants to design a scarf for Jeff's fandom here. It would be a darker color. I like it already. With subtle lettering saying, "That's an interesting question. Anyone want to make it?" Uh, yeah, if you, I will absolutely buy one of those. I think that sounds amazing. Um, I would love to see that. Um, I actually I inadvertently came up with a design for a T-shirt, which includes an explicative that I cannot say here. Um, but that you might see that pop up at some point. It is meant to be in good humor. Although JC, try the baritone. That's at JC. At Mandy, I will play and sing a song 1,000 times to get it to be familiar, and then 1,000 more times to make it absolutely second nature. Mrs. I would be useless making a scarf, but I can do a pencil portrait of Jeff with the lettering. That's right, Mandy. You totally that bruise that you drew was incredible. I was looking at him like, well, I was gonna pick one. That was amazing. For those of you, that aren't like chatting along, I tend to chat on Twitter a bit more than I do on Facebook. Even before the whole thing with Facebook happened. But I hope you don't mind me pointing this out, Mandy. Mandy is an artist of a variety of different sort of disciplines, and she did this like fake. She had a bruise. I guess it was. I guess that was on you, Mandy. There was like one bruise, and then she had copied the bruise exactly. And I'm like, there was a sort of challenge to see which one was real and which one was fake. I got it wrong. Luna the Great, hello. Tadeus, I was at the beach last week and I had been swimming for almost the whole day. Caught a cold as I could sing much easier. I had less tension. Sometimes when we're sick, that's like that. When you're sick, just sick enough where you have enough energy to maintain proper phonation. Like if you're really so like fatigued that you can barely stand, then you need to just lie down and go to sleep or something. But when you're only a little sick, sometimes you don't have the energy to engage the additional musculature, which is actually not ideal for singing. I'm so sorry. I'm so like burpy today. Veda. Hello, Jeff. Thank you for your online lessons. Do you know something about BIM University in London? Is it worth studying there? Is it hard to get there? I would like to study vocal, but I don't play. Where's the rest of your comment? I don't play. I don't know about BIM University. I'd have to look it up. If you want to have a look at that, get in touch with me via jeffrolka.com. Send a link, and I'll have a look at their website. Minor 7, thanks for answering, Jeff. You're very welcome. Awesome. Luna the Great, how do you strengthen your soprano voice? I can sing up to an A5, but by then I sound super breathy. Any tips? Well, so that's above the secondo passaggio for the soprano. If you're breathy, then you're not maintaining good vocal fold deduction. That will be your first step in in gaining more strength, because singing with an adducted vocal fold is a more balanced mode of phonation. Um, you might it's this is this I don't know where you're at in your overall training and what you're doing. Um, but there's a variety of how to sing over the break, how to sing in the upper register videos done, in the five. I do it for five ranges. I would have a look at that and then see what that helps. I imagine at least some amount of descending patterns. I'm really big on the descending patterns. It's just easier to do things differently when you approach it a different way than it is when you're approaching it the way you always have. Doing something different can be rather challenging. So to try to jumpstart the process, try to come in from the side. Check into that and then come on back and we can talk about it here. Again, today, sometimes when we're sick like that, we can we don't engage the additional musculature, which prevents us from using our voices effectively. This can last a perishingly short amount of time, though. So you really need to be conscientious about that. Mrs. Webster, ooh, okay, I feel a little sorry for the poor guy who's in the booth. Not at all, Mrs. Webster. That's what their job. I mean, that's what the engineer is there to do, is to set up the microphones, get the gain set appropriately, and make sure that the monitoring and channel volume is appropriate for monitoring purposes, both in the control room and in the cans in your headphones. That's their job. That's what they do. You're not putting them out. So a Broadway kind of sound is still going to sound okay, even if in the studio. We'll let you know how it goes. I mean, at some point, if you're creating so much volume that the microphone is clipping at the diaphragm, then there's nothing that they can do about it. But then the instruction becomes, to maybe move a little bit away from the microphone. And that can have other consequences depending on the kind of sound that they want to create. This is rather challenging if you're doing a song, for example, that has like verses that are really, really soft and kind of conversational, to then something that's explosively loud in the chorus. Speaking as a producer engineer myself, depending on what we want the end result to sound like, I'll often cut those separately. Whether I'm singing or I'm having someone else sing is we'll set everything up and do the verses first and then go back and do the choruses. Otherwise, why bother having the studio? That's what recording studios are for. Delcy couldn't sing well for months after I had an operation to remove a tumor from my throat. Wow, I now have a new tumor. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Dulcie, it's really hard to say. I think it's the intubation tube during surgery, and scared it will happen again, if not worse this time. You'll have to talk to your doctors about that. I don't know. I do work with one individual who um had an intubation tube. Like I think like they had like the tube was on a Monday and our lesson was on a Tuesday, and his voice was a little bit raw and tired. I hope for you that everything will be okay and that everything is removed successfully, and this is all um you know worry that has no teeth in a way, a manner of speaking. Um but yeah, you'll have to talk to your doctors about that and make them aware of your concerns and have them address it. I'm afraid I don't know what that might entail. At Mandy Cummins, at JC's Radiant Ray. Thank you, Mandy. Sequencer, a global voice. That's the Facebook group that keeps this conversation going. And if you'd like to get involved, go on to Facebook and search for Sequencer. And it's a closed group, so you'll have to ask to be admitted, but I'll admit you as soon as I go back and check. You can also interact with me and a lot of these other people that show up here regularly or just otherwise on the channel on Twitter as well. There's lots of good conversations that happen there. Singy McSinger Pants, thank you for chiming in, Delcy. Thyroid surgery is not likely to affect your voice since it is outside the larynx. There you go. I forgot Singy McSinger Pants is a, a doctor of some stripe, I believe. Ansley Hendricks, I have to say the most success I've had with singing this month has been working on Landslide, but I do have neck tension. Cool. Great work. What you might do is have a close look at Landslide and what it is about it that's helping you to be successful, and then try to apply those principles to your other repertoire. The intubation tube might cause the folds to get inflamed, but rarely cause permanent damage. Brilliant. Thank you so much for chiming in, Singing McSinger Pants. At JC's Radiant Ray, at Singwise Vocals, laughing out loud. Okay, drinking game. We take a sip of tea every time Jeff says, great question. Excellent. I love it. At Mrs. Webster, Kimberly Durr. Hey, Jeff, I'm a mezzo soprano. However, I'm also a true bass, baritone, tenor, and alto as well. I know you have videos for each separately. Could you do our one video for someone like me in one video? I'll think about it. There is one video actually that I did where I literally it's like it's old. And it was done as a request because I think someone wanted like I call it the greatest chord progression in the world. This like that thing. And I literally start like all the way here and go all the way across. Um, I would have to I'm it's out there. It's out there. And that would be one that you could maybe just use in the meantime. I'll think about it. I'll think about it. I tend to avoid those videos because the vast majority of vocalists um, would only use a small portion of it, and then they end up having to fast forward around, or skip over things, or go back, and it just gets kind of um, irritating. But by the same token, I can understand that you want to have this thing. Um, and I'm rather curious about your voice. Basically, what you're claiming goes against pretty much everything I've ever read. So I find that curious. Um, but I'll think about it. And I know I was going to do. What you can do also. There are at least a couple different videos, probably half a dozen or so, maybe a few more, that are only done for male and female. And so there you'd have just 2 videos that would cover the tessitura that you're talking about here. Thanks for the info. You're very welcome, Kimberly. Mandy Cummins. Chikondi, hey, Jeff, it's me again from Mozambique. What are the exercises for powerful voice available in your channel? Well, most of the channel is about balance, and that's how we generate power. So I would get in and go. But that being said, you may want to refresh your memory on Apogeo and make sure that you're using adequate airflow because that's going to make it all possible. My nose has this weird pressure. My nose feels stuff after finishing. Explain this. Sounds to me like I well, it would seem certain that you're directing a lot of airflow up into that area of your voice. Stuffy. Um, Maybe practice for a while pinching and releasing. So do your vocalizations, like "ee, eh, oh, ooh," and work towards keeping it so that your voice doesn't change tone. Like if I let it come too far forward, "ee, eh, oh," you can really hear that difference. Work towards keeping the tone even. You'll have to learn to keep the air from flowing too much into the sinuses. And when you can do that, see if it still happens. Everyone, I'm afraid I did not get to everyone's questions. If you've got a question, this video will get posted to YouTube as soon as I click off of it and close the session. Copy and paste your question in there and I'll answer it in due course. Thank you always so much. I really appreciate these sessions. I have such a good time and I enjoy your questions and I hope that you do too. My name is Jeff. Take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing and hopefully we'll see you again. Bye.